strong.
Hey, welcome. Hello, I am late, as is customary. Oh my goodness. Hi. Um, so the stream yesterday, my actual official slot on the Trans Lifeline rate train, took a lot out of me. Took more out of me than I thought. Was a lot of fun, but I was also more nervous and excited than I thought I was. And I only realized that after. So I am a little bit more drained today, I guess. So I do apologize if it might be slightly lower energy today. Let me add. I don't have the music added, so let me add that real quick. Why do I have two? Okay, there's the music. Okay, so we are back with our tabletop workshop with some more RPG design. However, I was thinking, what is a good topic I can tackle today? Something that may not require as much creative brain power, right? Where I come up with completely new ideas. And I was thinking, you know what? Tabletop game design is not just role playing games. Tabletop game design is other ones as well, board games, card games, and so on. And I've been designing those as well. And while there are differences between the two, there are also many similarities, and you can have cross-pollination of mechanics to a certain degree. Right? This is true not just of tabletop games. You can include all sorts of different mechanics from different games in new games of wildly different types. But that is a bit more involved. That may require a bit more thinking, a bit more trying things out, and so on. Whereas board game mechanics, there are a handful, or not a handful. By now, there are quite a lot of board game mechanics because there are tens of thousands of board games. And you can divide them into some neat categories with some clear use cases, some very good examples of great implementation in games. And you can take those and see, can I apply that in a role-playing game? And what would I use this for, right? Because, remember, mechanics must serve the gameplay. Right? Mechanics are there to help you have more fun. I'm seeing the music is kind of quiet. I'm always covering it up when talking. And since I'll be doing a lot of talking today, kind of like yesterday, you can probably hear it in my voice still. Let me turn the music slightly up so that it's not just gone all the time. All right, so so we will go today with implementing board game mechanics in TTRPGs. All right. Now, board games are a fascinating field because they got a resurgence and a big renaissance about it really started about 2 decades ago with the release of Settlers of Catan, which ushered in the era of the modern board game. And since then, people have been trying out more and different things, have been rediscovering a love for board games, have seen how different they can be from the mechanics that existed before. The mechanics that existed before were basically just you roll and move around a bit, and then things happen, right? A la Monopoly. Even a game like Clue, which is older, still has roll and move things in there. Roll and move being you roll dice, and then that determines how much you can do in a turn, or how far you can move in a turn, right? Which, as a side effect, of course, is highly variable. And makes games very swingy. And since then, board game design has grown and matured a lot. And we now see loads of different mechanics that have been, I don't want to say standardized, but categorized that have been categorized and that have been taken. So you can say this game is a deck building game. This game is a worker placement game. This game is a trick taking game. This is a an engine building game, right? Or things like that. And you have all of these mechanical categories. When you look at them, you see, okay, I understand what kind of a game I can expect here, and what kind of mechanics I can expect here, right? Because if you have something like worker placement, there are so many worker placement games that the mechanic of worker placement has been tried out and experimented on so much that a lot of bad ideas in using this mechanic have been tested and discarded, and a lot of good ideas have crystallized themselves out of all the possibilities and have been used and reused and reiterated and been perfected on, basically, over the years and over hundreds of games sometimes, right? So that's what I mean. There are certain mechanics that are very popular, worker placement being one of them, right? And they have been tried out a lot. So what we can say here is over... Oops. That's not quite what I wanted to grab. This one. Over the course of... when did it really start? I mean, it started with Catan, but like the surge came slightly after, so something like... And Catan was 95, I believe, 95 or 96, somewhere around there, right? So over the course of 15 plus years and dozens or hundreds of games, right? Great implementations of certain mechanics have crystallized, right? Have crystallized themselves out of the morass of the possibility space. And we can use that. That is like centuries of game design experiments and experience that we can tap into and use for ourselves, right? Because board game mechanics are not just restricted to board games. We can also use them for role-playing games, potentially. Right? So, there are a whole bunch. Now, if we go to something like Board Game Geek, which is the Board Game Geek, right, which is the biggest fan site concerning collecting information on mechanics. Board games, duh. There is this page on here. You can search for board games, and basically, it what's the catalogs? That's the word I'm looking for. It catalogs essentially every single board game, with some basic info like who designed it, when it was released, who published it, the box art. Right, and also the mechanics that are being used in the game, right? And then user ratings if there are enough people who know the game and have played the game. And they have a list. You can search for the games, you can browse the games, and one of the ways to browse them is browsing by mechanic. So you can go on this list, and you can look at. Let me see if I can share this. Just a window share. Maybe. Hold on. How do I share this? Window capture, window capture. Okay. But let me drag this down. And make it the correct size. Hold on. Okay, I didn't prepare this. I should mention while I'm doing this, I am still doing donations for Trans Lifeline. I should have probably opened with that. That's how drained I was. Okay, so this week is Trans Visibility Week, and there is a huge raid train going on of trans streamers collecting money for Trans Lifeline, and we're already at $9,104.66, which is unimaginable. And it's only Thursday. Well, no. According to the official timeline, which is in Pacific time, it's not even Thursday yet. It's end of Wednesday. We still have the rest of the week to go, so heck. That is wild. I am still participating in this campaign. My official slot was yesterday. But I do stream other than that. And for this week, I will keep this open as well. Anything you donate here will go straight to this total goal. It doesn't go to me, it goes to this total goal here. And I will still honor the incentives that you can see on the bottom as best as I can. Right, so this will happen. And then on Saturday when I'm streaming again, hopefully, same thing. I will keep all the donation possibilities open. All money donated will go to the Trans Lifeline, go to this collected goal, and then yeah, we'll see how much we can hit. Also, at the end of the stream, I will raid into whoever is currently on for the raid train. I don't know who that is because that depends on what time I end precisely. But I will raid into them in order to keep the raid train going. Okay. Now that I have set up this, all right, here we go. So this is let me do that. Does this work? Okay, this is slightly better, slightly bigger. Right. So here we have board game mechanics. So this is a way to browse all of the board games that are cataloged on Board Game Geek by mechanic. And you can see there are a lot. There are a lot because they try to be quite thorough, and there are always new mechanics being invented because that's just, you know, the nature of it. And they do have descriptions for yeah, they have a short description and some iconic example games, right, for the mechanics, and then top games, etc. So deck construction, dice rolling is a very common one, right? Back building, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of mechanics, and usually a game has more than one. right? A game tends to have more than one, which is also how you get so many. And we can use this to look at, all right, what exists out here, and what can we look at and try to implement. There's even role playing and storytelling I saw here. Yeah, role playing and storytelling. Right? So these are adventure board games that they have here. Gloomhaven, Arkham Horror, the card game, Too Many Bones, Mage Knight board game, and so on. These are adventure board games, which are relatively close to role-playing games, but not entirely. There is a difference. Storytelling. So this is when the game gives you a story to go through. Right, so that's what they mean. All right. Rerolling and locking. That's also an interesting one. So there's a couple of dice mechanics, different dice mechanics in here as well. Right. Rerolling, locking is Yahtzee, essentially, right? You roll a bunch of dice, pick a couple of them to keep, and then re-roll the rest. King of Tokyo is a big one, right? A big example. All right, so what does all of this mean for us if we are looking for a tabletop role-playing game? Well, what we can do here is one way to look at is to have a problem and look for a possible solution, right? So we're saying, I'm designing a role-playing game right now, and I want to have this kind of effect, this kind of gameplay in there. How can I do this mechanically? And then you look at various board game mechanics and say, oh, this board game mechanic gives me this kind of gameplay experience that I was looking for. Let's see how I can implement it. That is one direction. That is having a problem, looking for the solution. The other way is we look at various mechanics and look at possible ways to implement them in TTRPGs, which is the way I will have to do it today because I don't really have a problem right now. So I cannot say I'm looking for this particular gameplay effect. Not quite. But we can narrow our search a little bit by just hypothesizing and doing some thought experiments here. So, let's look at... Actually, hold on, let me see. Where's my mouse? So, let me see. Because something I've been looking at is the biggest thing right now is board game mechanics can end up being kind of complex compared to just rolling a die and looking at the result, right? Which is how most of role-playing game like resolution mechanics work. So the best way to implement this is implementing them into game structures, right? Mechanical systems. So, the relative complexity of board game mechanics makes them most suitable for game structures. Right. or like mechanical systems. Things like a combat system, things like like a dungeon crawl system, like a um, wilderness exploration system, running a domain, maybe tense negotiations, maybe I don't know, anything that your game might want, prospecting gems, farming, you know, farming simulators are a thing. Maybe running a shop, right? Um, alchemy, a complex alchemy system, right? Where you take plants and monster parts and all of the good stuff and then combine them into powerful potions and other alchemical um, products, I guess. So, right. Now, obviously, some of them work, some of the mechanics, board game mechanics, work better for some systems than others. Like, it is also thematically, like, you could take something like worker placement and turn it into a system where you're not actually placing workers per se. You don't call them workers, you call them something else. It is, at the end of the day, a sort of resource allocation. But how thematic that is, like, there's a certain amount of thematics tied to these mechanics. All right, so let's see. How to best. So let's go with. Um. Hmm. What kind of mechanics will give good gameplay decisions, meaningful gameplay decisions? Let's just look at some mechanics that I think have potential. So mechanics with potential would be uh uh some that are well designed or well implemented in many games. So worker placement is a big one. What even is this? So let me explain them real quick. What even is worker placement? So worker placement is you have a board with various spaces. And generally each space can only hold a certain amount of workers. And every player then has a certain number of workers that they have. And every space allows for some kind of action. You can gain resources, you can play a card, you can spend them to build something, you can, I don't know, advance certain tracks, depending on what game you're playing, right? Um, and remember, a lot of board games are competitive, right? So you're playing against the other players. So the first person goes and places a worker on a certain space and performs that action. Then the next player goes, places a worker on another space, performs that action. And at some point, these spaces will fill up, and later players, or you keep going round and round and round until people run out of workers, generally. And then at some point you go, oh, I wanted to do that action, but it is now full. Right? I can no longer do it because all the spaces have been occupied. So As a very quick example, you have like one action here that is +1 resource or something. +1 resource A. And then you have another field there that is +1 resource B. And then you have a field here that is spend resources to build or something. And another here that is, I don't know, draw a card. Right? And then each one of these has several spaces for workers, like so. And the first player comes along and places a worker on here, occupies the space. And the second person comes along, places a worker on here, occupies the space. Then the third person comes along, places a worker here, occupies the space. Then it's the first player's turn again, and they can no longer use this space. They have to use something else, because this is already full. This space has been completely tapped out. And then go, okay, I can no longer get resource A. I wish to draw a card then. And you continue, and this is how the round is played, right? You place a worker, do the effect, and then it's the next player's turn. And right, okay, let me get rid of all of this real quick. I should also write down what kinds of mechanical decisions. Let me make this in green. So we have worker placement. And the kind of mechanical decisions here is prioritizing. Prioritizing. So what happens is that the questions you ask yourself is, what space or what action? Hello? That looks like auction. Do I need the most? So that's the one you go to first, normally. But also, what action might be blocked? Yeah, when it's my turn again. And as a more advanced stage, can I block a critical action for someone else? Right? If someone else desperately needs to do that action and they can gain 20 points and just win, I can say, well, then I will block that action. It's not going to give me as much, but me gaining 2 points versus the opponent gaining 20 points and such, right? Or no, that was we're badly phrased. But like, if I can deny the opponent gaining 20 points, right, that can be a very, very valuable move, right? So I place my worker there in order to block that action for someone else. So these are the kinds of questions you ask yourself in worker placement. And of course, how many workers do I actually have? What actions can I even do, right? I might have 5 workers, but I want to do 7 actions. That's not possible. Oh, wow. What happened down here? So again, prioritizing. What action do I need the most? Then there is grab this color. Another big one is it's not too complex right now. What was the name? Deck building. Deck building. Deck building or bag building are very similar. Deck or bag building. The difference is for one of them, you have a deck of cards that you draw from. The other one is you have a bag that you put, I don't know, chips or blocks into that are all different, and then you reach in without looking and pull out a random one, and that's what you have. So they behave very similarly in terms of what you have to consider. So you have to, when you're deck building, you have to consider optimization. Optimization, right? So, because most deck and bag building games, as the name implies, you build your deck or you build the contents of your bag. So you, over the course of the game, usually you add more things to it. You add more cards to your deck. You add more chits or blocks or whatever to your bag. But most games also have the option or some sort of mechanic for you to remove cards and blocks and such from your deck or bag in order to remove things you don't want. Right? So you load your deck with things you do want and remove things you don't want. And usually the decks you start out with is a non-optimized deck that can go in multiple directions. Right? So a deck building game is various paths of specialization, right? And then build your deck or bag toward a chosen specialization. So that's how many deck building games kind of go. Or you can take out inefficient cards and replace them with more efficient cards. Right? So also, okay, did it improve overall, come on, efficiency. All right. So, one deck building card game that comes to mind is, I forgot the name. Oh my goodness. Oh god, where is it? Wait, is this deck construction? That's a different one, right? Oh, they go deck construction is this mechanic, and then they have deck building. Deck back and pool building. Okay. It's a different. Yeah, okay, there we go. So they list deck construction on Board Game Geek is where you construct your deck and then before the game and then just play with it. And then you have deck building. Yeah, deck building, back building, pool building, which are all the same kind of same general kind of mechanic. Which one was I looking for? I forgot the name. I played Ascalon, something like that. Is that? No, that's not it. Oh, Aeon's End Legacy. There we go. Yeah, that's why I didn't remember the name. It's a bit kind of sort of generic-ish. Aeon's End Legacy. So Aeon's End Legacy is a deck building game where you where there's a shared pool of cards that changes all the time, and then there's two ways to get new cards in your deck. You can either buy certain cards, or there are monster cards that you can fight, and you always have some normal cards, quote unquote normal, right? Buying cards on there that you can look at, or monster cards that you can fight, and they give you different kinds of effects, but both of you can lead you to victory. And your deck starts out with a bit of buying power and a bit of combat power. And then you can decide to specialize on one of the two. You can decide to load up your deck with more buying power and try to get rid of combat power because it doesn't do anything. And buy the cards and ignore the monsters. Or you can load up your deck with combat power, ignore or get rid of the buying power, and just fight monsters and get your power that way. Get points and such that way. And the effects you can get from both types of cards are different, right? But they can both lead you to victory. And so that's a path of specialization. And many deck building games go that way. And the prerequisite is that there is not one specialization that is stronger than the others, which is difficult to do. Right? It's easier to do if they are incomparable and if there are many, right? But there are many other deck building games that have kind of, which thing do I prioritize? Do I prioritize movement, or do I prioritize picking up treasure, right? If you're doing like a deck building through a dungeon crawl, for example. I think Clank kind of works like that. Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is a bag building game, which is where you play alchemists, quack doctors, right, who are just mixing random things into their medicines and potions. And you can also specialize what kinds of ingredients you want to get. And the different ingredients have different effects that you might want. Some ingredient lets you make your potion more powerful. Some ingredient lowers the chance that your potion will explode in your face. Some ingredient lets you do things to your potion, like special things depending on the exact ingredient, right? And so on and so forth. And so there are like half a dozen different ingredients, and they all do different things. And then you can say, okay, I'm only specializing in the red ingredient right now. I'm just gonna buy these. Whenever I get a new ingredient, I just buy red ingredients because that's the specialization I want to follow. And someone else goes, oh, you're buying all the red ones? I will buy all the green ones because they suit my playstyle more, and I feel safer. Like, some of them might be more high risk, high reward. Some of them might be low risk, low reward. And it's all about how much you want to, what style you want to play in, right? And that's what deck building does, right? Choose your playstyle, basically. So that's deck or back building. Pool building is also very similar. I'm not sure what they're calling pool building. Cards, individual decks. Yeah, it doesn't explain what it means by pool building, but probably something very similar. So basically the same mechanic. Okay, so that is deck building, which is a more longer term thing, right? So you build your deck over time. In deck building board games, you build your deck over the course of the entire game, right? Building the deck, instead of constructing your deck before gameplay starts, or as the first step of gameplay, and then just playing with that deck, which is get deck construction. In deck building, the building of the deck is the entire gameplay, basically, right? So you start out with a simple deck, And then over the course of the game, you're constantly building it. You're constantly adding and removing cards all the way up until the last round, basically. And then you check how good is your deck, or how much did you manage to do with it, right? Depending on the game itself. Dominion, the game that created this mechanic, was just at the end of the game, you go through your entire deck and see how much money there is in it. So during the course of the game, you have to buy money cards, but money cards don't do anything other than let you win the game. But during gameplay, money cards are empty, dead cards, right? So if you draw a money card, sucks to be you. You have to discard it and move on, which can cost you valuable turns. So it's all about timing, right? Do I buy cards that let me do things and then try to buy a load of money in one big push? Or do I just keep buying a bit of money here and there as I go on, hoping not to fall behind too much and such? In other deck building games, you are using your deck to power something else. Right? Quacks of Quedlinburg, for example. You are using your bag to brew potions, and then the effect those potions have and how well you brewed your potion, that determines how many points you get and what other effects you can have. Or in Clank, you are delving in a dungeon while trying not to wake up the dragon sleeping in there. And you are using your deck to move through the dungeon, to loot certain things, to sneak, to pick locks, or whatever there might be, right? But the deck at the end doesn't necessarily matter. So that's different ways you can implement that. Okay. What other mechanics? We had one that was rolling and locking. So rolling and locking. Yahtzee, basically. Right? Yahtzee. And that is rolling and locking is a push your luck mechanic. Push your luck is more general. But rolling and locking is a type of push your luck mechanic. Do they have push your luck as its own thing on here? They do. Right? But essentially, when you roll and lock, what you're doing is the decision you're trying to make is keep... Oops, this is horrible handwriting. Keep current, possibly suboptimal, result versus trying, or versus risking for a better one. That's, oh my god. So what does that mean? It means you roll something and you look at your dice and you say, okay, I got some sort of result. The result is not great, but it is something I could use. Now, I could re-roll this and hope to get something better, but there's also the chance that I will get something worse. And most importantly, with rolling and locking, you have to use the new result of any dice you roll, right? So you don't get to say, oh, I had my first roll, I rolled this kind of sort of okay result, then I tried for a better one, but got a worse result. Can I go back to my kind of sort of okay result that I got first? No, you rolled, you need to keep the newest result. Rolling and locking, or this kind of push your luck, sort of already exists in some games, right? Where you have, oh, you can re-roll, but you must You must use the new result even if it's worse, right? A game that uses rolling and locking to a certain degree is Forbidden Lands, or the Year Zero engine in general has a lot of that. So Forbidden Lands already implements that in its core resolution mechanic, right? So how it works is you roll a bunch of d6, and you get different d6. Like if you have a stat in a certain value, if you have skill in a certain value, you use different colored ones to differentiate, but that's not so important. So you look at your value, your stat value that you can roll. Say you're trying to, I don't know, push a boulder, then you roll your strength value, and you have a strength of, I don't know, 4 in total. Then you roll 4d6. And you have to get at least 1 6 in order to succeed on your check, which is not very good odds in general, right? So if you get a 6, you succeed. If you don't get a 6, you have a choice. If you don't get a 6, you can re-roll. However, 2 things happen. First, any 1s and 6s you have already rolled, you have to lock them. Right? Sometimes you don't have a 6, but you might have a 1. You have to lock that one. Then you re-roll all the unlocked dice, and then you get a second chance at getting a 6, right? So overall, your chances improve. However, 1s suddenly have an effect as well, right? So if you roll a 6 on a re-roll, that means, okay, you still succeeded, but you overexerted yourself, and now all the 1s you have rolled, including the ones you had to lock from before, right? Very important. Give you a negative consequence from that. Right? So you might roll your 4 dice, not get a 6, but get a 1, and then you think, do I risk it? I know if I re-roll now, I will have at least a single 1 here, but I have a chance of succeeding on my test, on my check by rolling my 3 remaining dice a second time and hoping to get a 6. Or I might roll 4 dice, not get any 1s, any 6s, and say, okay, I want to risk it again. I want to roll again. Right? Or you can roll 4 dice, get 2 1s, and say, okay, succeeding on this test is not as important anymore because I know I will get this negative consequence from those 2 1s that are there. And so on. So that's a very interesting mechanic that leads to quite a bit of choice. And it's the core resolution mechanic, right? It's the main way you get damage in Forbidden Lands, I think it's called. Yeah, Forbidden Lands. So this kind of already exists in certain points, but we can see if we can push it further. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else here? There are some, but they are a bit more. There's a mechanic that I don't know the name for. But I have seen it used a couple of times. Used in a Civilization board game. Group movement, hand management, open drafting. Is it hand management? Okay, they call it hand management. All right. So hand management is a bit broader. But that's what they call the mechanic. So Hand management is where you are given a certain hand of cards or other representations of things you can do. And you have to choose how to play them, right? You can either play them in a certain sequence or in certain groups, depending on the exact game. And again, what you're doing here is looking at opportunity cost. Right? So the way I saw it implemented in the Civilization board game, there are several. I think this was just called Sid Meier's Civilization. The board game. Yeah, Sid Meier's Civilization, the board game. That's just what it's called. But I saw that's where I saw this mechanic. And essentially how it works is you have 5 cards in your hand, right? Which represent different technologies. And whenever you play a card, you just activate one of these, do the effect that is listed on the card, and then you move your hand around. So your hand is always open on the table, and it is in a fixed sequence from first card to last card, right? That is very, very important. And when you play a card, you do the action that is listed on the card, take it, and move it to the first in sequence, and everything else gets pushed further up, right? So if you played it on 3rd position, you pick it up, put it on 1st, and the previous 2nd card becomes the 3rd card, the previous 1st card becomes the 2nd card, right? So it's like a conveyor belt kind of idea where you shift things back to the beginning whenever you use them. Now, these 5 cards all do different things, right? And you might want to do them in different situations. Like one card allows you to, I don't know, build a settlement, or one card allows you to move your units, one card allows you to gain resources, or whatever it is, right? But here's the thing. The higher the position of the card when you play it, the bigger the effect. So ideally, you want to play every card when it hits position 5. But that's not always possible because of the game situation. Sometimes you say, I really want to play this resource collection card when it's on position 5, but I need resources right now, and it's still on position 3. Do I play it now? Right? And get some resources and push it back to position 1? Or do I kind of have a couple of very bad turns where I can't really do anything because I'm lacking the resources, and push my resource card further up? And that is a very, very fascinating mechanic. That is the core mechanic of the Civilization board game, because all your actions are controlled through these cards. And you're constantly doing this opportunity cost optimization game with every decision of which action you want to take. And it's always in flux, because whenever you play a card, it moves back to position 1 and has to start recharging. Right? So that is an absolutely fascinating mechanic that I think is criminally underused. So while the ad break is gonna go, let me just write that down on here. So I'm just gonna use cards as a stand-in for whatever you use in your game to represent. It could be chits, it could be, I don't know, dice, it could be whatever, right? But it's
endure.
Doesn't really matter. So cards, play cards. Suboptimally now versus Spend empty turns to charge up the card for bigger effect. Okay. Another mechanic is, push your luck in general is a big mechanic that you can implement in general. What I had one in my mind. Worker placement with dice workers. So they actually differentiated that now. Okay. Right, dice drafting. Dice drafting. Dice drafting. Okay, so what is dice drafting? It's drafting with dice. So what does that mean? So usually when you have something like drafting in general, you do that with cards, right? So everyone gets a hand of cards, randomly assorted, and they pick one of those cards to keep, and then give the rest to the next player at the table, right? And then that player picks one, and sometimes you have just a single stack of cards that goes around. Sometimes everyone has a stack, and then you keep moving it around until everyone has a bunch of cards, right? Depends on the exact game. But it's essentially you look at a collection of cards, pick one to keep, and then give that collection of cards minus the card you just removed to the next person. Right? Drafting, as we know it. Dice drafting is similar. Dice drafting is there's a bunch of rolled dice, right? Very important, the dice have to be rolled. They can't be aligned or anything. You have to randomize them. And they're in a communal pool somewhere, and then you pick the dice. Through drafting, right? So first person picks one, or so the next person picks another one, and so on and so forth. Now, with dice drafting, the thing with dice is usually when we think about dice, we think of higher number equals better. And in dice drafting games, you cannot have that. You cannot have that, because then when you're drafting the dice, it is not a choice. It is just whoever goes first wins, because they just pick all the high ones, and then the players later on down the line get screwed over. Right? So you have to have something in the dice where high values are good in one thing, low values are good in another. And these two have to be incomparable. They must be incomparable. You cannot just do math on them. Example, a lot of games do player order, where player order matters, right? Dice Hospital is a game like that. So in Dice Hospital, what you do is the dice, you build a hospital, and the dice are patients, right? And the higher the number, the healthier the patient is, right? So over the course of having these dice patients in your hospital, you use the various doctors and rooms and so in your hospital to increase the number on each die until you increase it from a 6 to the next higher one, which doesn't exist, and that means you discharge the patient from the hospital successfully. If their condition gets worse, their number drops, and if it drops from a 1 to a 0, they perish. right? And then you lose points for that. So you want dice with high numbers because those are much easier to heal. They recover much faster, and then you can just, get lots of points for healing a lot of patients in your hospital. However, the dice are first sorted into ambulances with the lowest dice numbers in one ambulance and so on, and the highest dice number in the last ambulance. Whoever picks the first ambulance gets to go first. And they get to go first when picking hospital upgrades. Right? So hospital upgrades, new rooms and doctors and such, are also a communal pool, which means if someone picks a certain hospital room, no other player can pick that one. It's gone for this round, right? And then it gets recharged for the next round with new different random ones. So very important. You never know what to expect. So if you pick the highest ambulance all the time, because those patients are easy to treat, you might not actually have the facilities to treat those patients because you're always last in picking hospital upgrades, and then your hospital is just a weird amalgamation of random stuff in there that is not even workable, right? Whereas if you pick patients that are very bad off, or worse, or badly off, you get first choice, and maybe there's a really powerful room somewhere or a really good doctor that you definitely want, so you pick the patients that are just about to die, but then you get a really good doctor for the rest of the game. Awesome, right? So that's the choice you are making. And a lot of games use like player order versus dice power like this. Other games use things like you have to buy the dice, where higher numbers are definitely better, but higher numbers are also more expensive, right? So if you want to buy a higher numbered die, you have to pay more resources or points or whatever it is. Pulsar 2048, I think, uses that mechanic, where you roll all the dice, you sort them into various pools of how much it costs to buy them, and then the higher numbers are better in the game, but they also cost more. So that's dice drafting. So dice drafting, the whole point of dice drafting is incomparables. Right? So high versus low number on dice are good at different things, right? And it's your choice right now in the moment and in long term. All of these mechanics have a lot of long term thing to them, right? Which is why they tend to work better for some sort of game systems, game structures, rather than one-off things, one-off events, right? Because if you're just looking at right now, there's not much of a choice, right? It's saying, oh, right now, I just want to deal a whole bunch of damage, and the high dice do that. Okay, awesome. Then you just pick all the high dice. There's no choice involved. Or you can also say, all right, if I pick the high dice, I deal a lot of damage now, but then I lose momentum. If I pick low dice, I deal low damage, but I gain better position and better momentum over the course of the fight. Which one do I want? Do I want to prioritize longer-term investment? Or do I want to just deal a whole bunch of damage right now? That depends on the current situation. That depends on what dice have been rolled. That depends on how the fight in general is going. Right? That depends on a lot of different factors that you have to put in. And then you make your decision on drafting the dice depending on all of those factors. And because those factors are incomparable, the decision cannot be reduced to simply a math equation. That is very, very important. A lot of these decisions, and I've mentioned this before on other tabletop design streams. A lot of good decisions are decisions that are between incomparables, things that cannot be straight up mathematically compared, right? It's like if I pick these dice, I deal 6 damage. If I pick those dice, I deal 8 damage. It might be a very involved calculation that takes me 5 minutes to calculate, but if I am able to solve this equation, I will always know what the best option to pick is, and there's no longer a choice involved. It is just a math equation. Whereas incomparables would be like, oh, do I want to deal a lot of damage now, or do I want to build up momentum for potentially much higher damage later? I don't know if I will get much higher damage later, right? And I don't know if the high damage now is going to help me. I cannot compare these mathematically. I cannot plug them into an equation and just solve it. Right? So that's dice drafting. Okay. What else? Let's look at so there's also worker placement with dice, where you roll dice and then you place the workers and they have different effects depending on what number was rolled. Ideally, that combines worker placement with dice drafting to a certain degree, because if you just have higher number is better, then that's, again, very, very swingy, which is not great. It just means, oh, whoever rolled best, right? If I roll a whole bunch of 6s and you roll a whole bunch of 1s, I win the turn no matter where I place my workers. Because if only high numbers matter, I win with the dice roll. Right? So you have to make low numbers and high numbers matter. So there is a game actually that does that, worker placement with dice, which is, I think it's called Project Artemis. Let me check. I think it might be called Project Artemis. Let me just search for it real quick. Project Artemis. Artemis Project. Okay, close enough. Artemis Project. So the Artemis Project is a board game that has worker placement with dice. So you roll dice, and then these dice are your workers, and you place them on the different fields, like we discussed with worker placement. And higher dice give you a bigger effect. Yes. However, every space for the worker placement has a place for only a certain number of workers, as is usual, right? So a certain gather this resource might only have space for 3 dice in total, not per player, right? In total, that's important. And lower numbered dice have priority, which means if a space is already full with dice, but you have a die that shows a lower number, you can place your die there and push the higher numbered die off of that space and remove it from that action. Right? So you don't get that much of an effect, but you're more guaranteed to get that effect. Whereas if you have a high number, if you do get the effect, you get a lot of for it, but you're not guaranteed to get it because someone can just push you out with lower numbered dice. That is also an amazing system. And that is, again, incomparable. High numbered dice are high risk, high reward. Low numbered dice are low risk, low reward. You cannot really push a low numbered die off of a space, because you would need, like, you cannot really push a 1 off because you would need something that's lower than a 1, and that doesn't exist, right? So that's how that works. So that's, yeah, worker placement with dice workers. Okay, was there another one? The Mancala mechanic is very fascinating. Um, I might talk about that one. There are apparently two different auctions. The Dutch auction, the English auction. Ah. Ah, okay. Okay, that's what it's called. So I was thinking of a certain mechanic. I was like, what is it called? It's called a Dutch auction. Right. So auctions. Auctions and bids and such are very, very interesting. So auction. So the English auction is probably the one we tend to think of, right? The English auction is the one you tend to see in media a lot, right? Which is the English auction is willingness to pay. Right. It's an auctioneer going, all right, this painting will be auctioned off for $10,000. Do I hear $10,000? And someone says, yeah, $10,000. And the next person goes $12,000. And the next person goes $15,000. And then if it's some sort of ridiculous movie, someone comes in and says $2 million. And then everyone looks back in shock. It's like, why did you jump that high? Right? So that's an English auction, right? And it's the willingness to pay. It's like judging how valuable is this thing to me. So how much am I willing to pay for it? Right. So it's all about estimating the price of things or the value of things. Right. So estimating the value of auction good, right? For you, essentially, and then seeing, and you have to. The better you are at estimating this good for you, the closer you can judge when you are paying too much, right? And not overpaying. So it's not actually willingness to pay that we're looking at here. It's wait, what happened to my eraser? It's not willing to pay. It's value estimation. So it's what do you call that? It's called appraisal. Hello? Come on. Why are you not doing what I want? There we go. Appraisal. That is what you're looking at here. So that's an English auction. We all know what it is, I hope. The Dutch auction is a very interesting mechanic that runs in the opposite direction, but is used in quite a few games, actually. So the Dutch auction runs at... So the Dutch auction is used in things like the flower market, flower auctions, or other agricultural auctions, where someone puts up a lot, just like normal, at an auction, and then the auctioneer says, this lot goes for $1,000. Or I guess €1,000 because it's in the Netherlands, right? But then what you get is the price starts ticking down. The price starts ticking down at a steady rate, and everyone can see the current price. No one has to say anything or do anything. The price just automatically drops down further and further and further and further until someone hits the buy button, and then they buy that thing at whatever the price was at during that moment, right? So it drops and drops and drops and drops, and maybe it hits like $877 or euros, and then someone hits buy, and then they buy it at that moment. So what you're looking at here is the timing. If you hit too soon, you pay a higher price than you could have. If you hit too late, someone else will buy it before you. Right? That is how a Dutch auction works. And a lot of games use this kind of system by having, for instance, several community cards in the center that you can buy. But the older the card, the cheaper it is. Right? So you always have these cards in a fixed row, in a fixed sequence. And when someone, it's similar to the hand management thing, right? When someone buys a card, all the other cards shift, and then a new card gets added to the row. And you gotta imagine it looks kind of like this. You have a deck of cards, and then you have a row that moves like this, and then here you have, oops, the discard or something, right? Maybe, doesn't matter. And then here you have 4 or so, whatever, however many you might want. 5, let me draw 5 because that's a space. Slots for cards. And here is the price of these cards, right? And the price is always fixed by the age of the card. So the card that is about to expire or that has been on the board for a long time, yeah, no, usually they expire so they don't clog up the board, has a price of only 1. Whereas a card that just came from the draw deck has a price of 5. So every turn you might dump this card into the discard pile and then draw a new card to put in, and all the cards move and become cheaper. So the goal is to see timing, right? You know, if you really want this card, you know it costs 5 right now, but you also know next turn it'll only cost 4. Maybe even less. If someone buys the 3 card, right, you shift everything again and it might cost even less. However, if you don't buy it at 5, whatever, 5 resources this turn, someone else might. And then the card is gone. And then you don't get it. Right? So that is the danger. Why is this not my eraser? What happened? Oh, this is the eraser. What the heck? Okay, for some reason. Right? So it's about timing, that no one steals something out from under your nose before you had a chance to buy it. Right? Oh, okay, I see what happened. Okay. Right? Buying something, buying the auction good, right? For the lowest price possible. That's horrible handwriting. Before it's snatched away. That's a Dutch auction. And it's also a very fascinating mechanic. There was one more, I think, that I wanted to look at. One that isn't really used, like action points are used, for example. Action cues and turn orders are used in tabletop role-playing games. Like those are nothing new. What am I? Uh, do 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 do. Was it Mancala? Do I want to look at Mancala? I mean, Mancala is super fascinating. I don't know how you could implement that, but it is a fascinating little mechanic. Comes from the game called Mancala, which is an actual game. But you can use that game in and of itself as an entire mechanic inside other games. Trick-taking, I guess, could also be one. So let me just write these two down. So trick-taking, which is also not too foreign, I hope. And then we have Mancala, which I want to show because I feel like Mancala is so fascinating. Okay, so what is trick-taking? Trick-taking is what are you looking at with trick-taking? Yeah, so trick-taking is a type of resource management. Right, is a type of resource management. So trick-taking is a game. There are several other games which use that. Bridge, for instance, uses trick-taking, which is you have a hand of cards, and then someone starts with playing a card. Was it Hearts? The game you tended to find on PCs is also a trick-taking game, right? So people play cards, and then at some point, someone wins that hand and takes all the cards in it, right? And how you win that hand depends on the exact rules of the game. It could be the highest card that someone's played, but that's kind of boring, so you have some sort of restrictions. It's like you have to respond to the suit of the card, and then it must be the highest card in that suit that has been played. There might be a trump suit in there. There might be various other ways to determine which card is the highest card in this in this trick. Yeah. Right, so someone plays a card with a certain suit, and then other people have to respond with that suit, and whoever plays the highest card wins. That trick takes all the cards and then leads with another set. And so you're doing resource management. You're seeing, okay, I have 3 cards that are hearts in my hand. One of them is really high, some of them are kind of low, right? How can I play them optimally to still try and get the most tricks with the cards I have, right? So if someone plays really, really high cards, I might just throw away some other cards I don't need in order to try and win as many tricks as I can. So it's a type of resource management, right? It's how can I maximize the number of tricks I get with my hand? And an advanced question here that you can sometimes ask, depending on the game, right? If you use a standard 52 deck of cards, you can do that very easily. In some other games, it might not be as easy, but What are the other players holding? Other players holding. So there is a certain amount of card counting in there, right? Because if you know there is only a single ace of hearts, and it's already been played, and you have the king of hearts, you know if you play that, no one can surprise you by playing the ace of hearts on top of that and grabbing the trick from out under your nose, because the ace of hearts has already been played. Right? So that's also a bit of card counting and awareness of what cards are still in the game, which ones have already been played, what can I expect to win with my hand. Right? Or things like if you have to respond to a suit and only cards of that suit can possibly win tricks, and you have a deuce of hearts, but it's the only remaining hearts card left in the game. You can play it, no one else is able to respond or to the suit, they just have to toss out whatever, and then you win the trick. Right? So that's a large part of trick-taking games, knowing what's still in the game. Resource management plus card counting, actually. Let me put that in there. Card, oh my goodness, this is... So let me put this in here. Card counting. All right. Mancala mechanic. The Mancala mechanic. What is Mancala? So, Mancala is a game there where you have a certain number of bowls. I believe it's 6. Right, where you have 6 bowls. And in these bowls, you have certain stones of different color, or certain numbers of stones or so. Right? And what you do is you pick up all of the stones in one bowl, and then drop them one by one into the subsequent bowls until you run out. Right? And then something happens. I don't know the exact rules of Mancala, but we're talking about the mechanic here. So say there are like 3 stones in here or so, right? And you pick them all up, and then you drop them, one in here, one in here, one in here, and then you're done. And depending on the bowl you have, maybe the color of stone you drop, the number of stones that are now in here, right? After you've dropped them, you'd get certain effects. There are not many board games that have this mechanic. But it could be like, again, this bowl is resource collecting. This bowl is draw a card. This bowl is build something. This bowl is yet again something else, and so on. And you say, can I hit? I really want to build something. Can I hit this bowl with the beads that are in the other one? So if there's 3 in here, oh, perfect. 1, 2, 3, I hit it. If there's 4 in here, oh, awesome. 1, 2, 3, 4, I hit it. If you can't do that, then you might want to see, okay, how can I get some other action that is beneficial? How can I maybe get an action that ends up with a lot of beads in a bowl so that I can get a higher valued action out of this? And the thing about the Mancala is the more you use it during play, the more it changes, right? Because you constantly change how many beads are inside each bowl. That at any given turn, the situation will be completely unbalanced, for lack of a better word, right? It will be like, oh, it is super easy to get this one action, but no one can even try to get these other actions here because the beads just don't line up. And because you keep dropping beads on your way as you go, you are setting up actions for other people or ruining actions for other people, right? If there were 3 beads in here, let me use a different color for this. Yeah. Do I have the different color now? I do not. Okay, there. So if this is a new bead, right? Or let's make all of them green and the new ones are red because that's how I started. Right? If there are 3 beads in here and someone looks at this and goes, "Oh, next turn when it's my turn, I'm gonna hit this bowl with those 3 beads," and then you pick up this one and drop an extra bead in there, and suddenly there's 4. You go, "Oh no, you just screwed over my turn. I can no longer hit this bowl here." Right? By picking up these 4, because then 1, 2, 3, 4, I hit this action. Oh no, what do I do? Right? So the Mancala mechanic is very much about it's a type of rondel, which is another more general mechanic, right? But Mancala is a lot about what not prediction, but a lot about setting setting things up for the future. How do you call that? Or calculating things for the future. A lot of analysis, right? Combinatorial maths, effectively. Plus, best possible move. Right? It's because some moves are just impossible to do during certain turns because of how the beats are distributed. It is impossible to hit certain bowls this turn. But as people start shuffling beads around again, right, as they move, other bowls now become unavailable, but certain bowls now become available again, and so on, right? So, what is the best move I can hit with the current setup? And also, how will the setup change? Because it is possible to calculate how the setup will change, right? Because the math, the inputs are very easy. You empty one bowl, and then all the subsequent bowls get an additional bead until you run out of beads to distribute, right? And it's possible to calculate that to a fairly good degree. Of course, you cannot see exactly what other people will do, but you can kind of sort of guess, oh, this person probably wants to get some resources. Oh, that person probably wants to draw a card, right? And you can then use that to limit the amount of calculations you have to do, and then you can say, okay, when it's my turn again, that bowl might have 2 beads in it, and that means I can hit the action I want, but only if I do this turn right now to set up the Mancala in a way that it works out for other players, right? So, how will the setup change is a big one. I don't know how that could be implemented, but it just seems very interesting to do. All right. So that is a whole bunch of different board game mechanics. There are a lot more, as we just saw on the list of Board Game Geek. There are a lot more, but some of them are already used in role-playing games, right? Critical hits, dice rolling in general, and comparing numbers, movement points, action points, resource management, all of that, once per game actions, that are all of those things variable player powers, very obviously used in role-playing games. Right? A lot of them are already implemented, and certain other ones are very specific to board games that you might be able to implement, but it is tough, much tougher. Although things like tech tracks or tech trees are also implemented as well, right? I was just thinking, is that? Yeah, no, it's already implemented. So leveling up is a tech tree. It is. It's what it is. Gotta call it what it is. Right, leveling up your character is advancing up a tech tree. Okay. Ooh, so that was a lot of different mechanics that exist inside board games, where there are a lot of different board games that use these mechanics. And yeah. And let's see how we can use them inside game structures. So basically now we look at various possible game structures and how to implement these. And I think it's more important in a role-playing game than in a board game. Board games are very much mechanics first, mechanics only. The theme is very often tacked on and just there for color. Whereas in a role-playing game, if you have a mechanic, it should also communicate a certain theme. So if you have something like dice drafting or deck building, what does that actually represent in the game, in the narrative, right? Because role-playing games, and that is the difference between role-playing games and board games. So let me write this down. In an RPG, mechanics don't have to. There are plenty of examples of mechanics that don't, but mechanics should communicate a certain fiction within the narrative. Right? So if you use a certain mechanic to resolve a specific situation, then you have to kind of sort of see what this mechanic represents, what this mechanic is communicating theme-wise within the narrative. So if you have worker placement and you're doing, I don't know, domain building rules or like stronghold building rules, it's like, okay, I can see what's happening here. I literally have a bunch of workers here and I'm assigning different tasks to them in order to build up my stronghold. Okay, I get that. If you have a stronghold building game and you use, I don't know, trick taking, then you're like, what am I doing here? Am I playing against some sort of demon and the demon grants me pieces of my stronghold if I can outwit it or something? That's already harder to connect. It's harder to connect the mechanic to the narrative. And I think in an RPG that is very important, that the mechanics you use should, to a certain degree, mesh with the narrative that they are representing. Right? They should connect with the narrative they are representing. Or not just representing, but also abstracting, right? At some point, the abstraction is so far that you're playing a completely different game and then just saying, oh, this just happens in the narrative. And the reason this is important Hold on, let me finish this word. Representing. Okay, so the reason this is important is because you should be able to implement narrative decisions into the use of the mechanics, right? So, what do I mean? What I mean is when you unpack a certain game system to resolve a more complex situation, if all of the decisions you are making are purely mechanical, what you're doing is you are playing a minigame that has nothing to do with what you're currently doing. Right? So you are saying, "Oh, let's delve into this dungeon." And then you unpack a dungeon delving minigame that does something completely different where you don't have any narrative choices about what your character would do inside a dungeon. You're just playing some abstract, you're playing poker or something, right? And depending on how many chips you win, that's how many gold pieces you get out of the dungeon, right? So when you're playing poker to represent a dungeon delve, sure, you can do that, and you can tie the end result of the game back into the narrative. But inside this game, there is nothing connecting the mechanics to any narrative decisions or situations that you have encountered. Right? Absolutely zero. So, that's what I mean with they should mesh with each other. They should be connected with each other, because if you have a purely mechanical minigame to represent a situation, you are no longer role playing. You are just playing, quite literally, a board game or a card game apart from the RPG you were playing. Right? Or if you have a tense negotiation and then you unpack chess and play a round of chess, like, what do all of these things represent? Who knows? Certainly not arguments, right? Or so. It's like, and at the end, whoever wins the chess match wins the argument. Yeah, but how did the argument go? I don't know. I just played this one opening and then won within 10 turns. Hooray! Yeah, but what happened in the fiction? I don't know. I won the argument. Done. So that's what I mean, right? So the mechanic. I'm putting my foot down and writing must. This is my opinion, but I stand very, very strongly behind this opinion. Otherwise, you are not playing a role-playing game. You are just playing a game, right? Must implement the narrative. Oops. Including decisions made in the narrative, i.e., non-mechanical, into the mechanics. Must implement. Yeah, no, it's already here. Must implement the narrative, including decisions made in the narrative. At not be mechanics only. Right? So the negative examples here are negative examples, right? Resolving a dungeon. Oops. With poker.
or resolving a negotiation with chess. Right? So the only tie-in you have with a narrative at that point is, oh, we get into this situation in the narrative that triggers the use of this mechanic, and then the narrative gets completely thrown out. We only focus on the mechanic, and then after that, the result of the mechanic, win or loss, or how well you won, how much you lost, gets implemented back into the narrative. But there is no other connection, and that is bad. That is no longer role-playing game. Right? Now, these are extreme examples, but it is something to keep in mind. It is definitely something like you should connect the two, and you must give ways for the narrative to influence decisions you make inside the mechanic. So to come back to our positive example of using, okay, let me use this, right? Good example. Worker placement for stronghold building or something like that, right? Stronghold building. Because what that does is you can see the thematic tie-in. You have workers helping you build your stronghold, and you are assigning different jobs to them. Awesome, that's very thematic. And where you assign them, you can have a lot of narrative decisions in there. You can say, all right, I wish to complete the outer walls first because we are still in dangerous territory here, right? And the whole thing of we are in dangerous territory is the narrative. That is not given to you by the mechanics. That is the narrative situation you are in, and then you are making the narrative decision of where to place your workers first, or what actions are more important to you than others, right? And that is an excellent way of implementing the narrative into the decisions you make in the mechanics, right? So, clear thematic representation and also narrative situation influences what worker actions or worker spaces to prioritize. Right. So you're not saying, oh, I want to build the best stronghold and get the most victory points, like in a board game. You're saying, no, 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 the narrative situation is telling me we're in dangerous territory. We need to finish the outer walls as quickly as possible. So I will focus on that. Or, oh, winter is coming. We need to store a lot of food. I need to finish building the granary and getting a lot of farmers and hunters out. Right? That sort of thing. But winter is coming is the narrative. So that's what I mean with all that. Okay. Ads will appear about 2 minutes. I need to take a very quick break. So I will be right back right now. Actually, where's my mouse? My mouse is here. And then, yeah, I will see you in a couple minutes. Get up, have a drink, go to the toilet, whatever you need, have a stretch, and then I will be right back and see you in a couple of minutes.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Sorry about that. Okay, that was a bit longer than planned. But I'm back. Also, I just had this brain worm of like, did I actually press start streaming? Am I streaming? Have I just been talking for 2 hours to nothing? But apparently no. I am. I don't know where that came from. Hey! Hi Ren, how are you doing? How goes? Nice to see you here. Yeah, how is it? How was your week so far? I hope everything has been going well. We did a lot of talking and writing. Okay, how do I best do this? First, grab that as a next layer, and then... Okay, this is gonna look really messy, but I promise you it has system. So, that did not work. Doing fine? Been an alright week? Well, that's always good to hear. Is this not... What is happening? Oh, I get it. Let's see. So, yeah, okay, so this is gonna look messy. But if I can pull this off, I won't have to switch between the two layers all of the time. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just copying these mechanics onto another layer while looking at the first one. So rolling and locking. Hand management. Dice drafting. Oops, drafting. Auction. English. And then auction. Dutch. Trick taking. And Mancala. I can't think of anything for Mancala right now, but I'm just having it here. Okay, did that work? That worked! Ha! It doesn't look nice, but all I needed was the words on this layer for now. Okay. So. Hello? There we go. Okay. So. Now that... Good job. Thank you. I wasn't sure how good it was going to turn out. The handwriting was really messy because I couldn't properly see, but again, we talked about all of this extensively. I just needed this list on this layer right now. Okay, so what we've been talking about right now is mechanical decision making, right? So we listed up all of the different mechanics. We talked about what kind of a mechanical decision or what kind of mechanical decisions are you making when dealing with this mechanic, right? So we talked about things like dice drafting is about comparing high and low dice and seeing which one you need more. Worker placement is about which job you need performed now and which one might be blocked off later on. Deck building is about what path you want to go down and specialize in, and so on and so forth. These are all mechanical. Now we need to look at the narrative decisions that are in there, because we just said, okay, it's not enough to just have a pure mechanic in there to deal with role-playing situations, we also need to have the role-playing in there, right? We need to make sure that the mechanic can come out and influence our decisions and be affected by things happening in the mechanical system that we're using. So, looking at some narrative decisions, and the easiest way to do that, right? How? Let me actually put that in black as well. How to implement oh my goodness, what is wrong with my hand? Mechanical narrative. Oh my goodness. Brain. Narrative decisions. There we go. And there are a couple of things that we can look at. Things that help. So it helps if the mechanic already has multiple smaller decision points, which I think all of these have. That's why I listed them up. And factors of the value of decisions factors are broad. Broad, not browed. Broad. There we go. So what do I mean by that? I mean, to go back to our stronghold building worker placement example, the factor of, or not broad, let me put that, factors are, or extend beyond the mechanics. That's a better way to phrase that. So in a worker placement game in general, when you are placing your workers, sure, you're looking at the right now and seeing what actions do I want, who is going for what can I block, what might be blocked for me, and so on. But ultimately, you are trying to win the game. And so you are trying to gain victory points or move down a track, or whatever, right? And this victory point mechanic is not something that has to be the only possible mechanic, the only possible incentive of choosing certain actions over other ones, right? What did I want to write here? I forgot. Factors of the value of decisions. Extend? Heck, I forgot what how I wanted to phrase this. Decisions. Exceed the mechanics. Exceed the mechanics. Right? So you have a completely different set of things that you are worrying about when you are dealing with the mechanics. The victory points and such are not tied into the mechanics themselves. They are just a result of your decisions, and the different ways of gaining victory points influence what kind of decisions you make in the moment. And it is very, very, very easy to replace something like victory points with the narrative, because you want to, quote unquote, win the narrative. You want the narrative to go well. You want your characters to succeed. You want the adventure to continue. You want to tell a fun story. You want to get a lot of golden experience or whatever, right? And those kinds of things can very easily be factored into the results or the into the decision making of the decisions, oh my goodness, that you are making in the game. Oh, that was horrible phrasing. What is wrong with me right now? So, the decisions you choose are influenced by something that is beyond the decisions themselves, and this thing that is beyond it is, isn't it? Okay, let me try and move that. Can I move that? Can I move? Hold on. Where do I have game program? Can I move this? Does that work? That works. I can make it slightly bigger. Aha! There we go. It doesn't look quite as pretty, but great. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. Also, on that note, let me save this thing so that I don't lose all the progress I had. Okay. I fixed it. Yay! Okay. Also, is the chat in slow mode? It keeps telling me it's in slow mode. But slow mode should be turned off. Yeah, no, slow mode is off. Okay. Anyway, right, so this outside consideration of I am going for victory points can be easily, like, victory points can easily be substituted by narrative concerns. And playing against other players can also be easily substituted with narrative concerns. So you're not playing against the other players necessarily, but you are playing against whatever obstacles and dangers you are facing in the narrative. You don't see it in slow mode? Okay, so then it's just OBS messing up all the time. OBS keeps telling me, oh, chat is in slow mode. Because whenever I go offline, chat, everything gets locked down and chat gets locked down into slow mode. And then when I start stream, it gets removed, but apparently the notification for me is still on there, so I don't know. Ah, well. And it's always a little bit disconcerting. Okay. So so input plus output factors need to be at least partially narrative. And how much partially is, that is unclear. Like, if we look at something like the D&D combat system, are you making narrative decisions? Maybe. Maybe. Depending on how strict you are in your view, right? You are mostly looking at how much damage can I deal this round versus how much damage am I going to take this round, right? So a lot of the decisions you make are mechanical. Damage dealt or HP reduced on the monster, HP reduced on you, spell slots I have, attacks I can make, and so on and so forth. A lot of the decisions are very mechanical. but you can have a lot of narrative pieces still in there. And that is where a lot of this GM GM advice of how to make combat more interesting. Well, just add narrative stuff in there. Add other goals that are not just reduce hit points of all the monsters, right? Or include some other considerations. It's not easy, but the potential for including narrative factors is in there inside something like D&D combat. However, D&D combat is very, very mechanical, but people still accept it. So how strict do we have to be? I mean, this is now a kind of personal preference. I do view D&D combat as being almost like an entirely divorced mini game, separate from the main game. Right? It starts with roll for initiative and ends with one of the two sides being dead. And then you just have all the mechanical stuff flowing back into... And then you just have... Yeah, the narrative then gets influenced by... how much HP did everyone lose? And did we win or lose the fight? Right, and then you tell the story from that point on. And the way it is structured, the way the adventuring day as written is structured, is really you play through the story, and then the story gets interrupted by a handful of combats every now and then. And then after the combat interruption is done, you update your stats on your character sheet and then continue with the narrative. So those two are, like, the way it is presented and the way it is usually played is two completely divorced games. You have the role-playing of D&D, and then you have the mechanics, the game of D&D. And that being said, the D&D combat game is open enough, potentially, to allow for narrative decisions in there, right? And there are many tips and a lot of advice out there on how to implement that. You could have significant NPCs you are fighting against, and you might want to talk them down during the combat, or other narrative things happen in the combat, or like it's the whole do something else other than just attack or cast a spell, right? You could run away, you could try something else, and then that influences, and those are often narrative decisions that then influence how the mechanics play out and how the narrative overall develops. It's just not very supported very well. It's the mechanics are easier to fall back upon. So I guess this is a warning, right? Of don't make purely mechanical decisions and now we have to see, we shouldn't make them possible necessarily, we shouldn't make them optimal possibly, we shouldn't make them easy. Those are vague words because I don't know exactly how to phrase it, and it depends on the exact implementation. But what I mean here is, if purely mechanical decisions are possible, then you are already cutting out the narrative out of your mechanical system. If purely mechanical decisions are optimal, then players are disincentivized from inputting narrative into your mechanical system. If purely mechanical decisions are the easiest decisions, then again, players are disincentivized from considering the narrative while playing inside this mechanical system. So, right, so you need to incentivize plus support. The second part is often forgotten. Oops, often forgotten. Narrative decision factors. Decision factors. Right? And this is what makes where you take something that is a relatively generic mechanic and turn it into something more specific. Right? Which is why you cannot just lift a mechanic straight out of a board game and just plonk it into your role-playing game and say, all right, now we're playing this board game here while doing this thing. It's like, yeah, but a board game doesn't have narrative decisions built into it most of the time. That's kind of what makes a board game different from a role-playing game. Right? A role-playing game has all of those narrative decisions intertwined with the mechanics. A board game is mechanics first. And there are exceptions. There's a whole genre of adventure games, which is like Gloomhaven and so on. Seventh Continent, I think, might count in that, maybe. Anyway, there are those where you also consider the narrative. But that's kind of like an in-between structure, like story games, adventure games, and so on. So it's a spectrum, but for most of board games, they are mechanics first. So you do need to adjust and adapt these mechanics to fit them. So you need to look at what could these things represent, and what could these things represent, and how do I allow for? Is that nope? That's not what I wanted. I get what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so when implementing, what does the mechanic represent? And how do I allow narrative considerations? And it's not always necessary to have this. It's not always necessary. There are games out there that are very narrative heavy, but for certain tasks, they have a very mechanical system where you don't necessarily need narrative choices in there. That is also fine. It depends on the scale. Right now, we're talking about bigger mechanical systems, right? Actual game systems, not single task resolution, right? That's also a point I should put in there. So, suitable for what did I say? Larger systems, not single task resolution. Okay, so an example is there are some games where you have like lockpicking mini games, for example. And these lockpicking mini games could be full-on games in their own right. They could be QuickTime events; those are very simple. But they could also be something like BioShock. The first BioShock had the pipe puzzle, right? For hey, Amon, hello, good morning. How's it going? But like the first BioShock had this pipe puzzle where you had different tiles with different shapes of pipes, like straights or bends or something, and you had to guide fluid from one end to a certain exit. and you had to do that under time pressure because the fluid is slowly flowing, and then you had to move or turn and rotate the tiles correctly to make a single line of pipes to guide the fluid safely to the exit, right? And that is a game. That is its own thing. There are no narrative choices in there, but you don't need any because it's just for a single small task, right? Lockpicking. Or Mastermind. I've also seen games where when you lockpick, you are playing Mastermind, which is also its own game with no narrative decision points. But again, it's only for a single small task resolution. And those can certainly work, but that's not what we're talking about right here. But yeah, Amon, how are you doing? How's your week been so far? Sorry, I just had to finish that thought while it was in my head. Puzzle could be part of the story. It could be, definitely. It could be. But usually when you are playing the puzzle, while playing the puzzle, you are not making any story decisions. A bit hectic for the IT education. Ah, dang, okay. All right, so you play the story. So maybe a diagram. I did talk about this, but I never drew this diagram. So you get... So what I'm talking about, what I don't want, is you get narrative, right? That kind of goes on, and then you get a certain action, a certain incisive point, a certain action that you're doing, e.g., pick a lock, right? And then you get to the mini game itself. The puzzle stops the progress of the story. Yes, exactly. Then you get the mechanic. And then the mechanic starts with the action and ends with you finishing the mini game, right? And then you get essentially pass-fail, right? You fail to pick the lock, or you manage to pick the lock, and that continues to... That then continues the narrative. Right, so this is what I was talking about just now with those mini games. The time I tried to translate a book where you used to transfer from D&D into German. Oof. When you fail it, it could break your story. It could, but that doesn't change the overall structure that is here, right? If the narrative stops because you fail the puzzle, that is just a result of the puzzle. What I am actually talking about with here, so this is the what do I call this? The mechanical minigame, right? So mechanical, right? The mechanical minigame. That's what this is. What I'm actually talking about is mechanical. Oops, mechanical structure is what I'm actually talking about. So it starts out basically the same, right? You get... Can I move this? Oh, it pasted it to a new layer. That's not what I wanted. Okay, never mind. I don't want this to paste into a new layer. Okay, so you get the basic same structure. You get the narrative. All right, and that leads to not a single action, but a situation. E.g., combat. Right? And then what happens is you unpack the mechanics. Oops. I want to keep the arrow colors consistent. Right? mechanic. But you always have the narrative running alongside it, giving you various other inputs, right? And then you have some sort of result, and the result need not be pass fail, right? You have some sort of result that then continues the narrative. But because you had narrative input in the mechanics, right, this also gets influenced. So prepare for conversation with the DM about my changeling and his opinions that the shape changing is OP with no context given to balance it. Oof. So he wants to redesign the whole game to balance the game instead of just taking the rules as they are, I guess. Oof. See where DM's coming from. Fears that that logic would also like every character with charisma modifier higher than 4. Yeah, exactly. It's the game itself. Okay, so if we have an example of, say, a tense negotiation in there, right? You have the narrative, and then you get into the situation of, oh, we're now in a tense diplomatic negotiation. And then you unpack some sort of mechanic to symbolize the back and forth and the arguments you make and how much you convince the other side, etc. You can have a mechanic for that to help you structure things. But you make narrative decisions. You can say, all right, as part of my argument, I could try to intimidate this person. I could try to coerce them. Or I could try to sweet talk them. Or I could try to make certain factual arguments, like that. And depending on what kinds of arguments you make, that will change how the narrative plays out. If you use things like intimidation and coercion, sure, you might then succeed at the negotiation, but the other person will not like you. And that is a narrative outcome from a narrative decision. Whereas if you use sweet talking and things like that, you might also get what you want, but then the person has a completely different opinion of you, right? If you use factual arguments, if you use whatever else, those are narrative decisions or decisions made out of a narrative perspective, and they will influence how things will play out later, right? So it's not just the mechanics; it's the narrative spice in there as well. So that's what I mean with this, right? And the more the mechanic allows for and incentivizes and supports these narrative decision points, I can probably build this better. I can probably write this. So I can, yeah, let me write this a bit better, make a bit clearer what I'm actually trying to say here. So what we get in here then is decision A, right? And then you get narrative. Actually, hold on. I'll do that later. Oh no, let me do this. So you have like so, and then you have something like decision A, and then decision B, and then decision C, right? And so on and so forth. And of course, these are all parts of the mechanics, so you are making mechanical decisions here. And so all of these will feed into the result. But, very importantly, the narrative also feeds into the decisions you are making. Partly, I don't find it fair that my character gets his only ability balanced to one use per short rest when the other characters at the table has night vision, fire resistance, free spells, and later even gets the option to choose fire immunity. Yeah. Felt like resistance ignored. Oof. His clan in comparison to his one player race, which influence other situations. I think, yeah, what's happening here, this is an interesting case. Well, I think what's happening here is that shape changing is very powerful in narrative situations, whereas all of the other things are more powerful in mechanical situations. And it is much harder to see the impact of some ability in a narrative situation than it is in a mechanical one, right? And because we cannot see that, we either judge an ability to be useless or we judge it to be too powerful because it's difficult to judge, right? Narrative situations can be anything. We cannot attach numbers to them. Whereas something like damage resistance or so, it has a very clear number attached to it, right? We can calculate how powerful that ability is. Kind of. So I guess the fear is not so much a mechanical abuse, it's that you are given more options in the narrative. But that's like, shouldn't that be a good thing? Giving someone more options in the narrative? Right? And it is so easy for the DM to influence the narrative, much more than it is to influence numbers and dice rolls. The DM can just shape the narrative in a certain way, can have NPCs react in a certain way, and just build the story in a certain way in order to quote-unquote balance a narrative power that they deem too powerful, right? And it has a critical flaw with the culting amounts. Yeah, that's another thing, right? The fears that impersonate NPC when character has a rule to not steal identities. But even so, what is going to break when you impersonate an NPC? Right? That's the part, like, what it feels like is that the DM has a certain view of how the game is supposed to play, how the story is supposed to go, and fears that you can break their story by using this power in unpredictable ways. Right? And that means it's too powerful. It's kind of like the DM building a dungeon and then the player going, "Oh, I have a teleport spell. I can just walk through all the walls," right? And then DM goes, no, you can't because I put in a lot of work designing this dungeon." Right? It feels like that. It feels kind of like that the DM is afraid of having the story be broken because you have a power that is narratively focused. Yeah, exactly. But I don't. This is just your comments here right now. But this is a fascinating. Okay, this is a fascinating bit. Again, talking about narrative and mechanical things. Right. So you have a narrative power. A narrative power cannot inherently be balanced. It's just impossible to inherently balance something that is narrative based. Because stories can go anywhere. But what I feel like is that the DM feels like this power, this shape-changing power, can mess with their ability to tell the story they want too much. and therefore they want to limit how much you can influence the DM's authority, so to speak. Right? Whereas if a character has dark vision or if a character has fire resistance, that doesn't influence, that doesn't give them any ability to influence the DM's story. Right? That only influences certain very tiny things, like a damage roll here or there, basically, right? Whereas your power would be so open, so big, that and the ways to use it are so unpredictable that you can have some very creative solutions for problems that the DM throws your way. And I think maybe it doesn't even have to be that the DM is afraid you'll break the story. The DM might be afraid that you break problems that they worked on, and then you say, well, I shape change and solve the problem this way, and the DM is like, that is not the solution I thought you were going to do. I am not going to allow that because I want to see the solution that I thought of. Or, I put a lot of work in, I want you to spend a bit more effort into solving this problem that I spent 5 hours constructing. Right? That is very likely. A lot of DMs fall into that. Yeah, so at this point, it might really be that the DM is starting to get a feel for the story, or is starting to put more preparation into that, or whatever, and is starting to see, oh, your power is a problem in how I want to tell the story, or in how I want you to play the game. Possible. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm definitely not saying that's the case. So don't go accusing your DM of that right away, right? But it is one possibility of why a narrative power could be seen as being too powerful. Because it allows for very unorthodox, very creative solutions for things. Another thing the DM might be afraid of, I don't know if that has come up, but what might be afraid of is spotlight stealing. That is, because you have this very open narrative power that you can use in so many creative ways to solve narrative problems, and other player characters don't have those, whenever there's a narrative problem, you get the spotlight, and other players don't. That might be a thing, right? And that can definitely happen. But again, that is just a possibility, right? But yeah, definitely, yeah, it's always a good idea to talk about things like this. I'm just looking at it from a game designer point of view. But yeah, definitely talk to your DM and find out what he views the issue with a shape-changing power is. But also, and this is me as a DM or as a game master talking to you, don't just take it, essentially. If he says, no, I'm going to limit it to once per short rest, that's it, final word. And then you say, yeah, but if you do that, I'm not going to have fun at the table anymore. Right? You're destroying my entire character concept. I put a lot of work and thought into this character, and all of a sudden, I'm just not going to have fun playing the game anymore. That is not a solution. The solution is not because of DM fears, especially if they are unfounded, right? You have to find out if they are, but the solution is never to make the game less fun for some of the players. The one deliberate use per short rest is the prototype? Okay. Right? But again, if that makes the game less fun for you, that is not a solution. Right? The solution is never, some players will now be having less fun at the table. That is a bad solution. Right? Because you're playing a game together. You're meant to have fun. And if some person then decides, no, you don't get to have fun, then why play? So that is kind of what you need to do. You need to come to some sort of decision where the DM feels like they can still run the game well for everyone, but you don't feel like you're going to have less fun playing the game now. Which is not easy, but that should be the goal to keep in mind. I just spilled some yogurt. First, then big problems and the detailed work with fears and worries on this part. Oof. Okay. Yeah, but definitely try to find out what he views the problem actually is, right? With that ability. Why he thinks it needs to be limited. And it's very possible that his fears are just unfounded. That the things he fears aren't actually true. Or that they are his problem and not your problem. Right? The problem stems from the way he runs the game and not how you play the game. That could be the case. So definitely find out what his side of the story is, and then just, yeah, I guess talk about it. Don't wish to reset the character. Yeah, very understandable. You put a lot of thought and work into the character, and resetting a character or rebuilding them and changing a lot of core things is, it sucks. You don't get to tell the story you want to tell. You don't get to dive into your character and play them. It sucks, definitely. So that is not really a solution. Minor changes, sure, but big changes? No. Fully understandable. And that should not be the intended solution here. I need a new table to use her at all again for some DM changing his hard sell somehow. Yeah, again, because of the narrative power. Because, like, if they look at numbers and if they look at resistances and spells and such, it's like, yeah, these are easy to balance, or I can deal with numbers. But dealing with narrative, creative, problem-solving tools is very, very difficult for many DMs, especially DMs who only run certain types of games. Mechanic-heavy games. Like, game masters who run very narrative-focused games, or storytelling games even, they don't have that problem because they understand the mindset of you give the players just problems without solutions, and then the players have solutions without problems, and then they try to mesh the two together and create an awesome story that way. But a mechanic-heavy DM is usually very, very afraid of narrative powers, or narrative abilities and creative solutions, problem-solving stuff. Right, because they cannot grasp, because here's the thing. For many, and this is me talking from personal experience, I used to be this way, and I've seen many other GMs out there in discussions and videos and such talk about it like this. They view everything in terms of the mechanics, and in mechanics, you can win or lose. Right? In a combat, you can win or lose. In a skill check, you can win or lose. Right? That is something you do. And so a narrative problem-solving thing, you can, in the mind of many GMs and players as well, like this, you can win or lose. Which is not the case. Which is really not the case. But because they've never experienced other types of playing and other mindsets of how to run or play the game, everything is looked through this pass-fail, win-lose, succeed, and like success and disaster kind of lens. And narrative powers are especially hard to pin down for that because they are so open and because you cannot attach numbers to it, so sometimes you look at a power and go, this is pointless, why would I pick that? And sometimes you go to power and go, oh, this is so OP, I can just solve all of the narrative problems this way and just win the game. But no, creatively solving problems is kind of what you want. Right? It's kind of what you want. And they view everything through the lens of my story is supposed to go this way. And if someone has goes sideways or has some lateral solution to something, it breaks my preparation, it breaks my story, it breaks what I had in my head. And that's an issue. That really is. Which is why D&D is a horrible game to train dungeon masters with. It is not a good game for first-time DM. It is not a good game to learn how to roleplay and such, because win the game with work. Was a player against a changeling who was smart and prepared to impersonate a dwarf. This ability was useless for the last 5 to 7 sessions. Okay, let me just catch up on chat while Ad is playing. He likes story-focused games, but I think he looks at it after we had a changeling as an opponent in another game with him. There was a player against a changeling who was smart and prepared to impersonate a dwarf. Told him I'm a DM myself, so I do try to use the ability to break a social moment. So he says mostly the same, but shoots with emotional influence when they give. Okay, that's a lot happening right there. There's a lot happening in there. How to make us to pass a solution problem. I will wait until the ad is over before fully commenting on that. But there's some interesting phrasing in there and some interesting points being raised. So I nearly wished to strangle him because he sabotaged the party and the game often make the reveal of the changing harder than it needed to be. Wait, who sabotaged the game? So the changeling enemy sabotaged the game? Is that what you're talking about? The changeling who impersonated a dwarf? Stolen belt of changing was the tool the changing used to help with disguise. Oh, okay. A red herring. All right. Okay. There's a lot of things happening here. There's a lot of things going on. Oof. Okay, but this is valuable discussion as well. You know, this is tabletop-focused discussion. Okay, there's a lot going on here that we will have to excise and go through. The player character who is a DM, I had stole the belt and throw it out the window of the train and made the reveal harder than it needed to be. Oh. So they didn't actually look at the belt, they just threw it out and didn't notice that it was a belt of dwarven kind. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So there's a lot going on here. So first off, your DM was a player in a game against a changeling who was prepared and smart and impersonated a dwarf. That is amazing. That is so cool, because that is exactly how to use these kinds of characters, NPCs even. right? Any shape changers like that, like a changeling, a straight out doppelganger, anything who can cast illusions or actually shape change, yeah, you use them like that. You use them like that, and if you have a player who can do that, why not let them use it like this as well? That's kind of the whole point of playing a character like this, is that you need to be smart, you need to be prepared if you really want to use your character like this, if you want to use the abilities like this. And then why would you disallow or perhaps punish players who are smart and players who really engage with the narrative? To help because she's weaker than the person she tried to be. Okay. I get it now. Right. So the first thing I'm seeing here is players being smart and getting into the story, getting into their character, and really playing in the narrative is something bad? Question mark? That's the feeling I'm getting here, right? Like, if you have a changeling PC in the at the table, and the changeling PC is doing their homework and doing some awesome shape changes to impersonate people and coming up with creative solutions and playing smartly and really getting into, oh, if we're talking to this NPC, I should change into that person because that will help us talk to this person. It's like, thank you for paying attention to the narrative. Thank you for knowing who this NPC is that you're about to talk to. Thank you for playing your character. That is freaking awesome. Right? You should reward that. You shouldn't punish or disallow that. That is the first point. The second point is that you were saying you're not going to break social encounters. Breaking a social encounter, the way, I don't know if that's exactly what you meant, but the way you phrased it implies that there is a way the social encounter was meant to go, that there was a predetermined path through this encounter, and perhaps even a predetermined outcome of this social encounter. Maybe not as strong, but being able to, quote-unquote, break an encounter says that this encounter had an official way to play it. That is railroading. Don't do that. If you construct your encounters correctly, there is no such thing as breaking an encounter. If the party has an audience with the king, and the party doesn't like the king maybe, and then uses this chance, and the king is just being super condescending, and then the party just says, you know what, I will shoot my arrow right now and just murder this king right there on his throne. And then the DM goes, no, you can't, you miss. That breaks the encounter. Well, then that implies, that not just implies, that outright states that the predetermined outcome was that the party does not kill the king. But they want to. They are going to. Okay, just roll with it. They murder the king. Awesome, now you have an exciting story on your hands. Right? The party is actually affecting change in the narrative and in the world. Let them kill the king. Let them run away from the guards and become fugitives. Let there be chaos in the kingdom now because the king was suddenly murdered. Assassinated in broad daylight in front of everyone. Oh my goodness. If that isn't an exciting story, I don't know what is. And that is better than anything the GM could have planned because the players just said they wanted to do that in the moment. Right? There is no such thing as breaking an encounter. The only way you can break an encounter is if the game master already decided how the encounter is supposed to go. And that is an issue with the game master. That is not an issue with the players. That is railroading. Right? So there's no such thing as breaking encounters. That's the second point. The third point is here with clues. Needs to have information to be able to... Hold on. Needs to have information to be able to pretend to be someone else. It needs to be. My intention for Mirage was that she tried to use her voice changing to tell children stories of shifting voices. I mean, yeah, that's playing your character. Sure, a lot of it is playing your character. So the latter, I think, is in how to build mysteries. And mysteries are inherently very, very difficult to run. But you can make them more secure to run by just overloading the players with clues. Right? Players are not Sherlock Holmes. They are not trained detectives. They are very thick. They are not in the situation. They don't know everything that they're seeing or feeling or hearing or analyzing, right? They don't have nearly as much information as their characters would probably have in that situation in reality, so to speak. And so you need to overload your players with clues. So just throw all the clues at them. Come up with new ones, throw them all at the players. They will miss half of them, they will misinterpret the other half of them, and then they will find the one clue that makes them think, wait a minute, maybe this is the case. So that's the first thing. Just throw all the clues at them. The second thing, though, is, and here's the thing, the second thing is, solving the mystery is not guaranteed. If you plan the game in such a way that the players have to solve the mystery, that is railroading. The players might very well fail to solve the mystery. If they willfully ignore clues, if they throw out items, if they don't engage with the mystery, not because they're not having fun, but because they're doing their own thing, right? And they just bumble along and don't think about things too seriously or don't write down clues and such, then they don't solve the mystery. Then the story develops in a different way. The villain that they had to stop, their plan comes to fruition. I don't know, they kidnap the king. They finish the ritual. They summon the demon. Whatever it is, right? And you guys didn't solve it in time because you threw out half of the clues and you didn't bother to look at the other half. Sucks to be you. Now you have to deal with this new problem. We continue with the story. And that is a very, very big shift in mindset. A very big shift in mindset. And I understand that, again, D&D and many other games, you have to say, many other games do not teach you how to run games this way, and they don't support you in running games this way. If you look at things like adventure paths or like bigger adventures, like the ones that D&D put out, all of these adventures, because they are so long, because they cover such a wide range of levels and so many sub-adventures and encounters and such, they require events to play out in a specific way. Otherwise, the later parts of the adventure or of the campaign cannot happen as written, right? So because that is the case, because the entire adventure from level 1 to 15 or whatever is already planned out for you, Every part must create a result that can lead to a following part. And that is railroading. Right? And because many game masters and many players learn RPGs from adventures like this, from published adventures like this, with game systems that don't support creative problem solving, that don't support improvisation, that don't support prompting, that don't support like creating situations instead of creating stories. You get this whole idea of games going off the rails or breaking the game, breaking the story, which is not a thing. It is only a thing if the adventure you have prepared is railroading. 99% of the times. There are like some small exceptions that I'm probably forgetting here, where you can say, yeah, no, it is possible to break something, probably, and it did not result from railroady preparation, probably. But 99% of the time, when people prepare adventures and play adventures and say, oh, this went off the rails, or this is broken in some way, it's because they already had mentally prepared a result of how this encounter, how this adventure is supposed to go. Don't do that. And yeah, many TTRPG systems only explain the fight mechanics, social situation often left out. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that is a case of poor DM support. Poor Game Master support. D&D is notoriously bad in Game Master support, which is yet another reason you shouldn't learn how to run games with using D&D. There are so many better games out there that teach you that. My definition of breaking a social situation is that I throw the ability in without preparation on my part and maybe asking the DM if this action is okay for him, because I sometimes know that could hit him off guard. Even so, like as a game master, I love being surprised by my players. In fact, this is probably like a flaw of mine, but when I prepare, by now, I just kind of say, all right, I'm just going to throw them in this situation. I have no idea what they're going to do. I literally do not think about what they might do. And then I just roll with it. Right? Ideally, you should prepare games like that. You just give them situations. You can prepare different situations, of course. But then you say, I'm just going to throw this at them, and I have no idea what they're going to do. And whatever they decide to do, I'm just going to roll with it. Right? And if you then give players creative problem-solving powers, it gives it what that does is it gives them more chances to throw you to throw you a curveball, right? To catch you off guard. Once had to buy a few pigs with a platinum coin and she transformed to her vampire countess form. Oof. Because I could imagine this would be funny to hit him unprepared. Yeah, like why not? If you watch, like even if you watch Critical Role, right, which is the thing that got most people into D&D, they do that. They do that. Like I do believe that Matt Mercer over prepares a bit because he wants to be completely secure, but like he gives them a certain situation and then the players just pull out the weirdest things that he has no idea what to do, and then he looks at the players with their crazy plans and then he says, I love playing this game, right? Because of this completely out of the left field, wild, crazy, can never have imagined before solution to problems. But I don't want to spoil what happens in the campaign in Critical Role, but it's basically the players using spells, using creative spells like also shape-shifting and other things like that, invisibility, other stuff, to just do really crazy things that the Matt Mercer probably didn't even think of at all. But they just do it right there, and he's just like, okay, let's see how this goes off. Let's just make a few dice rolls and then see how you do, right? And that's amazing. It was one of her 6 pre-built forms. Okay. But yeah, so it's a game master. That's why improvising is a big part of being a game master, and a lot of the preparation you do, and ideally a lot that the game system should help you with, is in improvising. So you prepare things that cannot be improvised quickly, and you prepare things that will help you generate ideas to improvise, right? Random rolls, random tables to roll on, list of prompts, I don't know, just things that a deck of cards or something that where you flip the top card and then it says, okay, this happens now, whatever. Like things that help you with improvising, right? Prompts. Even in improv game shows and such, there are usually prompts from some list, cards from, I don't know, that they pull out of a hat, or prompts from the audience, right? Even in improv game shows, not game shows, improv shows, when they do their things, they ask the audience for prompts. And then, because it is much easier to generate crazy ideas off of a prompt than it is when everything is wide open. And so your prep, a large part of that, either in the prep or in the system itself, is to help give you prompts. Blades in the Dark, for instance, is amazing for that, because the core resolution mechanic immediately tells you, okay, this action failed and there needs to be consequences, or this action succeeded and there need to be consequences. Here is a list of possible ideas for various situations that you can use. Or it gives you lots of tables to roll on. Oh, you need to generate an NPC? Here, a full page of tables that you can roll on for 30 seconds, and then you have an NPC. Go ahead, have fun, right? Things like this are good GM support. And so, yeah. As a DM, I had a puzzle and my player found a solution that sounded logical, worked also. Yeah, exactly. And that's like, you throw, because the problem is expected for, prepared for, expected way to go through the room, and the player found 2 new ones. Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. Right? Because players have different brains than you, hopefully. And so they will come up with completely different ideas. And it's like when you're preparing the game, you have certain thoughts in your head, but when the players are thrust into the situation, are confronted with that, then they think completely different things. One brain can't compete with 4, that as well, right? The players are a group of people who can bounce ideas off of one another. And that is a big thing. And that is something a lot of GMs are, I think, afraid to use. They're like, oh, when I design something, I must know how the party gets through it. And then the next step, the worst step, is I will only accept this path through the problem. Just throw problems at them. Who cares if they can solve them or not? You know, that's their business. That's just, bleh. Whatever, just come up with stuff. That's like, if you watch the the game I actually ran on stream 2 weeks ago. I just prepared a situation. It was a mystery game, so I knew what was happening in the background, and I had a list of possible clues to give to the players. And I had an opening situation. That was basically, I had the opening. And then I just played the game, had the opening situation happen, and then the players just did whatever. Right? They did things, some things I expected them to, some things I didn't expect them to. And, they just did things, and I just threw other stuff at them as they came up. Right? And it didn't go super well. I could have prepared a little bit more, I think. But in the end, it worked out. They solved the mystery, so that's cool. But essentially, just give your players problems and let them create the solutions. My preparation system, bubble system. Right, yeah, you have several different bubbles and you just throw them at them. Yeah, free-floating puzzle parts I can place in if needed. Yes, exactly. That's a very good system. So to wrap everything back around to what started this whole thing, because I believe many players and game masters feel like the game needs to play out in a certain way, and maybe not in the small decisions, but in the overall, like if you have some sort of mystery, the expected result is they will solve the mystery. When I ran the mystery 2 weeks ago, I didn't know what the solution was. Right? I was just, maybe they solve the mystery, maybe they all die, maybe something else happens entirely, I don't know. I'll let myself be surprised by what they do. Right? So it's like, okay, maybe they don't talk to this NPC. Maybe they don't murder this monster that they have to. Maybe they don't find this magic item. Okay, but the adventure, this part of the adventure must conclude with this bit, must have this encounter, right? I must run encounter A, B, C, and then encounter D, and encounter D must result in this event happening, and then the game can continue, right? A lot of thinking goes like that. And if you prepare a game like that, you are just setting yourself up for failure. When a dungeon was planned as a kobold den, when they don't go there, my preparation bubble starts float and is placed on the pile of ideas for later use. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That is a very good way to prepare. And that's where a lot of this not being sure how to judge narrative powers comes from. Because a narrative power can only break a story if there is a pre-planned story to break in the first place. Right? If there is no pre-planned story, if there is no predetermined sequence of events or decisions that need to happen, if that does not exist, there is nothing to break. And then you can just have narrative powers be interesting tools. They need the exact same kobolds later, but not in this cave. Okay. I mean, fair. Yeah, sure. Why not? Right? That is smart preparation. That is recycling the ideas you have already prepared. And so my biggest tip, as someone who has played and run and designed role-playing games for 25 years and made all of the mistakes and saw discussions and videos and talked to other players and GMs and such, do not pre-plan events. Prepare situations. Prepare. It doesn't have to be a sandbox. It doesn't have to be a sandbox, right? It can be a limited clearly defined situation, but it's just the opening, just the starting situation. Throw the players in there, let them play with the powder kegs, let them blow things up, let them talk to people, and then just see where it goes. Right? Or another party who walks into a mine. Like another party of adventurers. Oh, sorry. I had to sneeze. Another table. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, if you run multiple games, you're not limited to just using ideas for one table only, right? Ideas are ideas. You can just use them wherever. And that's the biggest tip, right? Prep things that help you with improvising. Prep things that can't be improvised at the table. And prep background. Know the situation, right? Understand maybe the timeline that led up to now, the people who are involved, what their plans are, maybe the start of a timeline of events or such, right? Sure, plan those things. But don't say, okay, they go through encounter A, then they go through encounter B, then C, then D, that, and so on and so forth. You're setting yourself up for failure that way. That includes, by the way, predetermining if an encounter is a social or a combat encounter. That includes that. So one of the absolutely most baffling preparations I have ever seen for any D&D campaign, ever. I just did not understand how the DM could prepare this way and not have their campaign fail, or having to re-prepare everything live while running the game. Was they had Adventure 1, Adventure 2, Adventure 3. Okay, a bit iffy, but okay. But then they had percentage values for the encounters in each adventure, divided up into social, exploration, and combat. So they said in this Adventure 1, 25% of the encounters are social encounters. 35% of the encounters are exploration encounters, and 40% of the encounters are combat encounters. I'm like, what? What? How? How do you prepare like this and not have everything fail spectacularly or have to railroad extensively? Right? If you go into an encounter and the game master has decided weeks before during preparation, this is a social encounter, period. And then the players decide, I'm going to attack this NPC. What do you do? Did you even bother to give that NPC combat stats? Do you have the tools to improvise combat stats for this NPC right now? Or do you just say, no, you can't, a bunch of guards appear and stop you from attacking? Like, what do you do at that point? Or a combat encounter, right? A bunch of orcs. You open the dungeon door and there's a bunch of orcs at the other side. They draw their weapons. Roll initiative. And the player's like, actually, can we try talking first? Too bad. You already rolled initiative. The orcs attack. That is railroading. So don't do that. just don't. You're setting yourself up for complete failure because all of your prep becomes useless the first time the players surprise you, which is going to happen right away. Or you have to railroad in order to protect all your precious preparation that you did in order for it not to break. theoretically you can talk in a fight. You can. But really, is it like, okay, I swing my sword at this dude and then I say, please not fight? You know, it's like and this is what I was talking about before, this whole thing, the mechanical system given to you for combat does not incentivize this kind of a solution. Right? And this is a very modern thing. This is a very modern development, really. If you look at older D&D, it didn't used to be that way. You open a door, there's a bunch of orcs on the other side. You're all surprised that you see each other. What do you do? It's not the GM then saying, oh, roll initiative because these are orcs and orcs are meant to be killed. Right? No, that's not what happens. The D&D game, we decided that a talk action length depends on how long it takes or strategic critically it is. Yeah, and to me, that feels like it disincentivizes talking even more. Because you are using your precious actions in the action economy, right? Where you could, I don't know, reduce the enemy's hit points so that you don't die, and instead you talk, which has a very high chance of not making sure you lose all of your hit points and die, right? And that is the whole, it makes the mechanical decision the more optimal one over the narrative decision. Start running. Interestingly, running away in modern D&D combat is not a thing because of how D&D combat is structured. Because of the initiative order of everyone, if one person starts running, everyone else has to wait their turn before they can start running, and they might get murdered because their ally with a high initiative decided to run first, but they have a low initiative. All the monsters then just hack at you because you're left alone. Sucks to be you. Your ally managed to run away, but you rolled badly at the start of combat. You get to die. And when running away, there are no systems for running away. Old D&D had systems for running away. They even had things like, oh, if you drop gold, if you're chased by intelligent monsters and you drop gold or valuables behind you while running away, there is a certain chance that the monsters will stop chasing you to pick up the gold that you just dropped. Or if you're being chased by a non-intelligence monster, if you drop food, it has the same effect. It has the chance of that monster to stop chasing you because it will eat the food. And then you have a chance of getting away. These systems were hard-coded into the rules of old D&D. They do not exist anymore. Running away is not a thing in modern D&D. The only way to end a fight is for one of the two sides to get completely murdered. And that's what we were talking about here, right? Because you have this isolated, completely divorced minigame, there are no narrative decisions put in there. There are no other systems, other supports to do things that are not coded into the mechanics. And that's what I want to avoid here. As a warlock with Eldritch Blast, to have a door the enemy needs to walk through much better than open space. Yeah, exactly. You try to set up combat in a way, but again, it's like how much does the system support that? Focus of Lizard Man that they even stop when they see meat has its origin there. Yeah. Definitely. Right? And I'm not joking when I say this was hard-coded into the rules. If you look at the rules text of old D&D editions, you will find a section on running away and a whole like, oh, if you drop this and that much gold with intelligence monsters chasing you, there is a, 3 in 6 chance that they will stop chasing you to pick up the gold instead. Right? That is actually a thing. And the blasting's only an option because running can only bring you so far. Yeah. So it's okay. This is another point, I guess. You have to make sure that you have to make sure that mechanics don't disallow or make convoluted certain narrative decisions, such as running away in a combat. There are a lot of very fascinating changes that happened around 3rd edition of D&D that completely changed how the game works. Things like no more morale checks for monsters. So monsters used to be able to run away, right? Because every monster had a morale value, and during certain events, like if they lose half their number or if they lose half their HP, you make a morale check for them, and if they fail, they run away or they surrender or something like that. That got taken out. The individualized initiative, right? That completely changes the way running away happens at the table, because you now have to run away during your turn, and then monsters could act before everyone has a chance to run away. Tying XP values strictly to murdering monsters, even though that also happened in 2nd edition. But there's a series of changes that culminated in 3rd edition being a completely different game. So yeah, that's, and it's, so the one thing is mechanical support for various ways you can make decisions in game, but the other is also just bad preparation by the game master. So these are the two big topics that are kind of like intermingling here right now. They run after me, the option of escaping might disappear. Yeah, exactly. It's also like, oh, okay, I use my entire run action, all of my actions to run as far as I can. Okay, then the monster goes, well, I have the same move speed as you. I will use my turn to run after you. Oh, look, we're now at the same distance again. And then you can just keep doing that for 30,000 turns, and your relative distance will never, ever, ever, ever change. Because you just use your move, your actions to run as far as you can every turn, and both of you run the same distance, and then right? It doesn't change anything. You're just wasting turns running. What price does a social situation have when done right? That's an okay. What exactly are you asking here? What price does a social situation have when done right? I'm not 100% sure on what you're asking here. Like, you mean reward? What do you get rewarded for? For overcoming a social situation? That's also another thing, I think. It is hard to find XP reward or item scale. Yeah, definitely. It is. Yes, and that is another issue of tying XP rewards to overcoming obstacles. What does it mean to overcome an obstacle? Which is why I'm much more a fan of milestone XP, because milestone XP is, you have now played for this far and come this far in the story we have created together. Now is a good time to give you some a level up. Right? We've now reached a milestone in this story. But like in 5th edition, and I think in 3rd edition as well, you don't really have that. You don't have, oh, if you manage this negotiation, you get this much XP. or if you manage to disarm and bypass this complex trap, you get this much XP. For spending game time, fight encounter XP. Yeah, that is a good way to do it. Very interestingly, very interestingly, 4th edition of D&D gives you guidelines on how to calculate XP rewards for overcoming non-combat situations. Fancy that. So, in 4th edition D&D, you have something called skill challenges, which are a bit rough. You need to go now? Oh, okay, no problem. If you do want to listen to... I'm going to end soon anyway. I've been going for a while. But I just want to raise this one point about 4th edition, and then I will end. But in 4th edition D&D, you have something called skill challenges, which are a bit rough around the edges. It could use some improvements here and there. Oh, Advanced 5e, I still have to look at that one. Apparently a lot of people praise that, the level up version. I have to check that one. So I try to adapt. Yeah. Skill challenge used there. It's very likely taken from 4th edition and other games that use similar ways. But essentially, you have a challenge that is overcome by using the skills instead of your combat abilities, right? It could be disarming a complex trap room. It could be a social negotiation. It could be traveling across a dangerous trek of wilderness, right? And so on and so forth. Those, I think, are the big 3 examples they give in the book. And what you do is you assign a difficulty to it, which determines the difficulty class of the skills. It determines how many successes you have to get. It determines what skills you can use, etc., etc. And then you run the skill challenge through your players, right? And they make narrative decisions. They say, oh, okay, then for this trap, I want to put up some sort of barricade here, so if any arrows or whatever poison darts do shoot out, they don't hit us, they hit the barricade. Okay, then you make a craft roll to do that. And then another person says, okay, I want to see where the pressure plates are. Right, make I forgot what the skills are called, search roll or investigation or something. Okay, and then you do that. And depending on how many successes or how many failures they get, they either succeed or fail the skill challenge. And if they succeed on the skill challenge, they get a certain amount of XP. Because that was tied to the difficulty you selected for the skill challenge, right? So it gives you a mechanical system for running non-combat encounters that represent a series of smaller tasks based on the character's skills, along with all of the framing devices of a combat encounter, XP and difficulty and a clear success and failure parameters and such, right? So I would work for Mirage better, but we all need to adapt the Changeling too because there's no similar option book. Yeah, and that gives you a powerful system to handle challenges like that. It doesn't mean you have to use it, but if you do want to use that, run something like that, and you don't know what to do, you can do far worse than using a skill challenge, right? So it's a pretty cool idea. And there are other games that use things like that. Fate, for example, also has a challenge system like this. And it even ties clear XP values to succeeding in the skill challenge, right? Just like a combat encounter. So that is a really good system. Or a really good example of how you can use systems like that to run situations that are not just combat. Of course, you can have different systems. You can have more specialized systems. You can have a system just for social negotiation. Burning Wheel has a system like that, for example. It even has a system for ranged combat, maneuvering and taking cover in ranged combat, and then a completely different system for melee combat, right? So you can have a lot of different specialized systems in your game. Just make sure not to overload the players. Like Fantasy Craft is a game like that overloads the players with a whole bunch of completely different systems, which are super specialized. But then you have to learn all of them if you want to run the situations. Okay. So much about this. So we talked a lot about using board game mechanics and adapting them, what to watch out for when adapting them to role-playing games. I might expand on that when I have more of a brain for ideas, or more concrete systems I want to develop, and can say, all right, let's use this board game mechanic and see how that works. And then we talked a lot about running games in general. Save this, close Krita. Oops. Did I just... Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Let me snooze the ad real quick, and then let me check whose turn it is for the Trans Lifeline raid train. Let me check the schedule real quick. Transweek of visibility, final graphic. Okay, so what time do we have now? We have 3 p.m. local time. That's midnight. Wonder Aria. It looks like that is the person we are raiding. Let me just check. Wonder Aria. Oh yeah, they just got raided by a lot. Yeah, this looks good. Okay. So we are raiding Wonder Aria, who is the current streamer running the current slot of the Trans Lifeline raid train. So we are going there. Yeah, I got the timing right. Yeah, okay. So, let's go to that. All right. Raid Wonder Aria. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I hope this was educational to a certain extent. I did ramble a lot, but I hope you took away a thing or two for designing games, or running games. We talked a lot about that. So, yeah. That happened. I will be back on Saturday with more Baldur's Gate, and I will continue the donation thing, and we will raid into the next person with the raid train again, etc. All that good stuff. Thank you all for being here. Take care, and bye-bye.